My dear brothers and sisters, let us take a moment of silence, not the silence of absence, but the silence where God's whisper can be heard. It is in that silence that the seeds of faith are sown, and it is through faith that the impossible begins to breathe. We live in a world that measures possibilities. We calculate risks, we predict outcomes, and we place our hope in what we can see and touch. But there is a deeper reality, one that transcends logic and reason. It is the realm of God, the realm of the impossible becoming possible, the realm of miracles hidden within the quiet heart that dares to believe. Look at Abraham, an old man with no child, and yet he believed. He believed God could do what nature had declared impossible, and in his old age he became the father of nations. Or think of Moses, standing before the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army closing in behind him. All seemed lost, yet the waters parted, not because of Moses, but because God moves when faith is placed in him. Time and again, Scripture shows us that God's specialty is impossibility. The barren womb of Sarah, the sun standing still for Joshua, the fire that did not consume Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These are not mere stories. They are testimonies, and if we open our hearts, they become promises. But I ask you today, how many times have we reduced God to our own expectations? We say we believe, yet we hesitate. We say we trust, but we set limits on what God can do. We treat miracles as rare exceptions instead of remembering they are the language of the kingdom. To believe God for the impossible is not to abandon reason. It is to allow grace to complete what reason cannot. Faith is not the denial of reality, but the conviction that God's reality is greater than ours. Look at the young girl Mary, visited by an angel, told she would bear the Son of God. She asked how, but did not doubt. She did not demand a sign beyond the angel's presence. She said, "Let it be done to me according to your word." She believed the impossible, and through her, salvation entered the world. When we think of the impossible, we often think of healing from disease, the restoration of broken families, the conversion of hardened hearts. And yes, God still does these things. He still heals, still restores, still saves. But perhaps the greatest impossibility he works is the transformation of the human heart. Your heart, my heart. We are not born ready to forgive those who wound us, to love those who hate us, to hope when we are surrounded by despair. Yet grace makes it possible. Grace allows us to love beyond our wounds, to hope beyond our failures, to rise even when everything in us wants to stay on the ground. I have seen this. I have seen the addict who was lost in the night of his soul walk into the light. I have seen marriages resurrected, communities rebuilt, and children return home. And in each of these, it was not human effort alone that saved. It was the touch of God, working in lives that dared to believe. You may feel today that your situation is too far gone, that your sin is too great, your weakness too deep. But I say to you, there is no pit so deep that God is not deeper still. There is no night so dark that the light of Christ cannot find you. Sometimes we think that miracles are only for the saints, for those who lived long ago. But the truth is, God has not changed. The same power that raised Jesus from the dead lives in us, and it is not reserved for special occasions. It is here, it is now, but there is a cost. Faith requires surrender. To believe God for the impossible, we must let go of our own control. We must allow God to be God, not a consultant we visit on Sundays, but the Lord of every moment. We must be willing to step out of the boat like Peter, keeping our eyes on Christ even when the waves rise. And yes, we will doubt. Peter doubted. Thomas doubted. Even the disciples, who saw the risen Christ, struggled to understand. But Jesus did not reject them. He walked with them, spoke peace over them, breathed his Spirit into them, and he does the same for us. So, do not wait until you feel ready. Do not wait until the path is clear. God rarely shows us the whole road. He shows us the next step. Take it. Trust him. He does not ask for perfect faith, only a willing heart. Believe God for the impossible in your family, for that son or daughter who has wandered far. Believe for their return. Believe God for the impossible in your own heart, for the healing of wounds that seem beyond repair. Believe God for the impossible in our world, that wars may cease, that the poor may be lifted, that peace may reign where only violence has lived. The gospel is not a message of partial hope. It is total. It says that death itself has been defeated, that nothing can separate us from the love of God, not hardship, not sin, not fear, not even the grave. Do you understand what that means? It means we can walk into every storm with peace. We can speak life where others declare death. We can love when it seems absurd, because we are not walking in our strength. We walk in the strength of the one who makes all things new. And yes, there will be moments when God seems silent, when prayers feel unanswered, when hope flickers, but even then believe not in your feelings, but in his faithfulness. For faith is not the absence of struggle. It is the decision to keep trusting even in the struggle. I leave you with this. Our God is not only the God of what is likely. He is the God of what is impossible, and he is inviting you, yes, you, to step into that promise. Do not let fear have the final word. Do not let the world define your limits. Let faith rise. Let hope rise. Let love rise. And as you believe God for the impossible, may you become the living proof that nothing is impossible for those who trust in him. And when we begin to walk with that kind of faith, something shifts, not only around us but within us. We begin to see differently. What once looked like failure becomes soil for growth. What once felt like the end becomes the beginning of something greater. Our vision becomes infused with God's vision, and suddenly the ordinary becomes sacred. Think of the widow of Zarephath, a woman preparing to die with her son, with only a handful of flour and a little oil left. Yet she gave it to the prophet Elijah, a final act of generosity, or perhaps of desperation. But behind her act was a trust, a surrender, and God multiplied her supply. The jar did not run dry. What seemed like the end was turned into a miracle. That is what God does when we believe. Or think of David, a young shepherd, dismissed by his own family, underestimated by a king, mocked by a giant. But David did not believe in his own strength. He believed in the God who had delivered him before. And that faith made the impossible possible. The stone that struck down Goliath was not just thrown by David's hand. It was carried by trust in the living God. This is the pattern. God chooses the weak things to shame the strong. He takes what the world considers useless and breathes divine purpose into it. We may look at our lives and see only brokenness, only fragments, but in God's hands, fragments become testimonies. Leftovers become abundance. Wounds become wisdom. That is why believing in the impossible is not about emotion. It is about trust. It is not about grand gestures, but quiet surrender. It is found in the mother who continues to pray though her heart is breaking. In the man who chooses honesty, though it costs him everything. In the child who sings to God in the midst of hunger. That is where the impossible begins to stir. Do you know how many miracles go unnoticed because we call them coincidence? How often God is at work around us, and we do not see it because we are waiting for thunder instead of listening for the still, small voice. The impossible is not always spectacular. Sometimes it is quiet. A hardened heart that begins to soften, an anxious mind that finally finds rest, a relationship thought dead that begins to heal. These are not small things. These are resurrection moments, and they are holy. And so, my brothers and sisters, we must ask ourselves, what have I stopped believing for? What prayer did I once whisper that I have now buried under disappointment? What dream has been silenced because the world called it foolish? Do not bury what God is still breathing on. Do not silence the longing that He placed in your heart. That longing may be the very place where the miracle begins. He is not finished. His promises are not forgotten. And even when you feel you have no more faith to give, He is faithful still. This is the heart of the gospel, not that we reach God, but that He comes to us, not that we earn miracles, but that we open our hands to receive them, not that we perform, but that we believe. To believe God for the impossible is to believe that the cross was not the end. It is to believe that the stone was rolled away and that death was swallowed up in victory. It is to live as if Christ is alive, because He is, and if He is alive, then there is always hope. Even in our suffering, faith holds. Even in our weakness, His strength is made perfect. When you pray and the answer delays, keep praying. When you hope and the wait is long, keep hoping. God is not slow. He is precise. He is not absent. He is present in ways we cannot always see. And sometimes the greatest miracle is not in what changes, but in who we become while we wait. For the waiting seasons are not empty. They are where trust is forged, where character is formed, where the roots of faith grow deep, and from deep roots comes unshakable fruit. Let the world call it madness. Let them say you believe too much. Let them mock your faith, for they mocked Noah too as he built the ark. They mocked Jesus as He hung on the cross, but the flood came and the stone was rolled away. And history belongs not to the doubters, but to the faithful. So lift your eyes, speak to your soul, remind yourself of what He has done. Count the times He made a way. Remember how He found you, how He called you, how He carried you. That same God has not changed. His arm is not too short to save. His mercy is not too weak to heal. His power has not diminished, and you, yes, you are not disqualified. Your past does not exclude you. Your doubts do not define you. God chooses the broken, the bruised, the least likely. He is not looking for perfection. He is looking for surrender. And when you give Him your yes, even if it trembles, He will do the rest. He will take your mustard seed and move mountains. He will take your whisper and echo it in heaven. He will take your tears and turn them into joy. So open your heart, believe again, hope again, risk again. Because with God, even what seems final is not final. Even what seems dead can live again. And as you begin to live in this reality, this bold, trusting, expectant faith, you will notice that your prayers change. They are no longer just cries for rescue. They become declarations of who God is. They become the language of relationship, not desperation. You begin to pray not as someone begging from a reluctant giver, but as a child speaking to a father who delights to give. This shift is powerful. It doesn't always change the circumstance immediately, but it changes the atmosphere of your heart. You begin to live with anticipation, not anxiety, anticipation. You begin to walk into each day looking for what God will do, watching for the subtle signs of His movement, tuning your spirit to His whispers, and this is contagious. Faith like that cannot be contained. It begins to influence others without you even trying. People will see the peace in your storm, the joy in your hardship, the unwavering trust in your voice. And they will wonder, they will ask, they will be drawn not to your strength, but to the one who strengthens you. This is how revival begins, not in stadiums, but in surrendered hearts, not in grand shows, but in simple obedience. One person who believes is enough to change a family. One family who believes is enough to shift a neighborhood. And one community who believes can transform a nation. But we must not be afraid of small beginnings. The impossible often starts small. A single seed buried in the dark. A single prayer lifted in secret. A single act of love in a world grown cold. Do not despise the days when nothing seems to be happening. Heaven is often at work in hidden ways. Jesus Himself spoke of the kingdom as a mustard seed, the smallest of all seeds. But when planted, it becomes a tree where birds find rest. That is the nature of God's work. It begins in obscurity, but ends in glory. And if you wonder whether you're capable of such faith, remember, it is not about having a giant faith, but about placing even the smallest faith in a giant God. Faith is not about certainty. It is about trust. It is not the absence of questions. It is the presence of relationship. You may not understand the path you're walking. You may not know how the promise will come to pass. But the one who leads you knows, and He does not make mistakes. He led the Israelites through the wilderness with fire and cloud, not the shortest path, but the surest. He led Joseph through betrayal and prison before the palace. He led Ruth through loss before redemption. So trust Him even when the map makes no sense. He sees what you cannot. And while we believe God for the impossible, we also begin to live with compassion. Because once we've seen God bring light into our own darkness, we cannot turn away from others still walking in the shadows. Faith does not make us proud. It makes us tender. It does not elevate us above others. It draws us closer to them. You will begin to carry the burdens of others differently. You'll intercede for them not as a task, but as a privilege. You'll walk into hospitals, prisons, broken homes, and chaotic streets, not as one defeated by the darkness, but as one carrying the light. Because when we believe God for the impossible in our own lives, we start to believe it for others too. This is what the world is longing for. Not polished words, not clever arguments, but lives that radiate the presence of God. Lives that bear witness to a power greater than human will. Lives that are living miracles. And this is possible for every single one of us. The invitation is for all, not the perfect, not the powerful, not the elite, but for the poor in spirit, the hungry in heart, the ones who still dare to believe despite the pain. It is those who limp forward in faith, who have wrestled through nights of silence, and yet still whisper, I believe, who see the glory of God revealed. It is those who remain when others walk away, those who wait when others move on, those who hold on when others let go. He is not distant, observing from some unreachable throne. He is Emmanuel, God with us in the silence, with us in the fire, with us in the waiting, with us in every impossible place, quietly weaving redemption into the story we thought was over. And when we live with that awareness, we begin to walk differently. Our steps are steadier, not because the terrain is easier, but because we know who walks beside us. We begin to bless the breaking because we see what it produces. We begin to sing before the victory because we trust in the one who promised it. Faith for the impossible is not a faith of escape. It is a faith of presence. It does not promise a life without hardship, but it transforms how we endure it. It makes the fire a place of encounter. It makes the wilderness a place of provision. It makes the storm a place of revelation, and it keeps us from settling, from accepting less than the fullness of what God has spoken. Too often we make peace with mediocrity, with a faith that asks nothing and expects little. But that is not the faith of the gospel. That is not the faith that opens prison doors and heals the sick and reconciles enemies. God calls us higher, not for status or spectacle, but so that his love may be made visible through us. When we believe for the impossible, we become signs of hope in a hopeless world. Our lives point beyond ourselves. Our stories point to the Savior. You may be the only Bible someone ever reads, the only glimpse of Jesus someone sees. And what will they read in you? Will they find fear or faith? Will they find defeat or expectation? Will they find a life explained by human logic, or a life marked by divine intervention? Because this world is aching for something real. Not another performance, not another empty promise, but an encounter with power, with truth, with love that transcends understanding. And that's exactly what Jesus offers. Not an idea, not a philosophy, but himself. The risen Christ, present, powerful, compassionate, and he invites you into this life of impossible faith, not just to believe in him, but to believe with him for what seems unreachable, unchangeable, immovable. To believe that the addicted can be freed, the lonely can be loved, the dead things can live again. But it begins with intimacy. Believing God for the impossible starts with knowing his heart. And when we know his heart, we stop fearing the outcome, because we trust that even if the miracle looks different than we imagined, it will still be good. Even if the door doesn't open the way we hoped, the hand that guides us is always trustworthy. There is a depth to that kind of faith that cannot be shaken. Not by delay, not by disappointment, not even by loss. It is the kind of faith that says, even if the fig tree does not blossom, still I will rejoice. It is the kind of faith that looks at the cross and still sees resurrection. And when that faith takes root in a person, it multiplies. You don't need a platform to carry it. You just need a heart open to be used. Your daily obedience becomes a catalyst. Your whispered prayers become declarations in heaven. Your faith becomes seed that bears fruit in ways you'll never fully see this side of eternity. And that's the beauty of it. This journey of faith is not just about what we receive from God, but about who we become with him. It is about transformation, about becoming vessels of his glory, not in spite of our weakness, but because of it. God delights to use the unlikely. He chose fishermen to change the world. He used a stammering Moses to speak to Pharaoh. He chose a persecutor named Saul to preach grace to the Gentiles. He is not looking for perfect resumes. He is looking for yielded hearts. So if you feel small, good. If you feel unqualified, perfect. If you feel like everything in your life disqualifies you from being used, remember, that's often the very place where God begins. Where the world sees limitation, God sees preparation. And sometimes the impossible God is asking you to believe for is not out there, but in here, in the quiet chambers of your own soul where forgiveness seems too hard or peace feels out of reach or self-worth has been buried under years of shame. He wants to resurrect those places. He wants to write his truth where lies have taken root. He wants to show you that the greatest miracle is often not what he does through you, but what he does in you. Because when transformation takes place within, everything around you begins to shift, not because the world has changed, but because your perspective has. Your heart becomes anchored in something deeper than circumstance. Your hope is no longer fragile, tied to outcomes or timing. It is steady because it's rooted in the character of God Himself. This is what sustains us when the answers delay, when the doors remain closed, when the healing doesn't come in the way we expected. Because faith for the impossible is not about a guarantee of comfort. It's about the certainty of God's nearness. It's about knowing with quiet assurance that we are never alone in the waiting, never abandoned in the struggle, never unseen in the pain. In fact, some of the most powerful faith is forged in those seasons that feel silent and dry. When heaven seems quiet and prayers echo back without response, it is there, in the hidden place, that God is strengthening you, preparing you, teaching you to trust the giver more than the gift. Because when you know He is good, even in the silence, then no circumstance can steal your peace. And let us be clear, faith is not passive. It is not sitting still and hoping for things to change. Faith acts, it obeys, it steps out of the boat while the waves still crash. It walks around Jericho even before a single brick has fallen. It digs ditches in the desert before the rain has begun to fall. Believing God for the impossible is not inactivity. It is courage in motion. It may look foolish to others. It often does. Noah looked foolish building a boat under a clear sky. Mary looked foolish believing a virgin could give birth. The disciples looked foolish feeding thousands with just 5 loaves and 2 fish. But in every case, what looked like foolishness to the world was wisdom in the eyes of heaven. And this is why we must live not for the applause of the crowd, but for the quiet affirmation of God. Because when you live by faith, you will often be misunderstood. People may call you unrealistic, naive, overly spiritual. But it is better to walk in divine confidence than to dwell in human caution. It is better to risk everything on a word from God than to play it safe in your own strength. You were not made for safe, small, predictable faith. You were made for bold, surrendered, mountain-moving faith. Not because of who you are, but because of who He is. The same God who breathed the stars into place calls you by name. The same God who calmed the sea holds your future in His hands. The same God who raised Jesus from the dead now lives in you. So stop measuring your future by your present limitations. Stop defining your potential by past failures. What God has spoken over your life is not cancelled by your weakness. It is empowered by your surrender. The less you rely on yourself, the more room you give Him to move. And He will move in ways you do not expect, at times you do not choose, through people you did not anticipate. But always for your good and always for His glory. He doesn't ask for perfection, He asks for your yes. He asks you to believe that with Him all things are possible, even the things you stopped praying for, even the things you've convinced yourself to stop hoping for, even the dreams you buried in disappointment. He is the God who brings dead things to life, who restores what was lost, who makes all things new. And while others may look at the external, God is always working in the unseen. He is rearranging hearts, opening doors, sending provision before you even realize you need it. He is faithful not just to deliver you, but to walk with you in every step toward the promise. So don't wait for everything to be perfect before you trust. Trust in the middle, praise in the waiting. Declare His goodness even while you're still climbing the mountain, because it's not just about getting to the other side. It's about discovering who He is along the way. And as you walk in that trust, watch how the impossible begins to bend, not always immediately, not always dramatically, but steadily, surely, undeniably, because God is faithful to every word He speaks. His promises do not expire, His mercy does not run dry, His power does not weaken with time. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if He did it then, He can do it now. So today, as we stand at the edge of what looks impossible, let us not shrink back. Let us lift our eyes, steady our hearts, and believe again. Not in our own strength, but in the God who defies logic, who reverses diagnoses, who restores what was broken, who calls things that are not as though they were. Let us leave behind small faith and timid prayers. Let us stop measuring our future by what we see and start declaring it by what He has spoken. Let us become people who carry a different kind of hope, unshakable, undeniable, rooted not in what we feel, but in who He is. The world doesn't need more explanations. It needs demonstrations. It needs men and women who will live as if God is still able, who will walk boldly into dark places with light, who will believe not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. Because nothing is impossible for the one we serve, and when we believe Him, truly believe Him, we become part of the impossible made visible. So take heart, dream again, pray big, stand firm, and above all, believe. Thanks for watching.